The great ancient city of North America, the Cahokia Mounds, were transformed by a mysterious fire in 1170 AD. Alexander Light, Human Survey reports, 1,000 years ago, in the place where St. Louis, Missouri now stands, there was once a great civilization whose city center was ringed with enormous earthen pyramids, vast farmlands, and wealthy suburbs. For hundreds of years, it was the biggest city in North America. Then a mysterious fire changed everything. Pyramids. Remember in the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean? He said that before and after the sinking of Atlantis, various Atlanteans with their ancient advanced technology had gone to various parts of the world and set up new cities with pyramids, sphinxes, and the likes of what was to be found in Atlantis. Now, for hundreds of years, it was the biggest city in North America. Then a mysterious fire changed everything in St. Louis, Missouri. And the city that once existed in St. Louis, current footprints is known today as Cahokia, and its creators are commonly called the Mound Builders because of the 120 or so enormous mounds they left behind. Shaped much like the stone pyramids of the Mayan civilization to the south, these mounds rose up hundreds of feet and were often built on top of tombs. At their summit were ceremonial buildings made of wood and thatch. Unfortunately, many of these magnificent creations were destroyed by the 19th century when St. Louis was built. And below you can see one of the only remaining pyramids known as Monk's Mound. The first evidence of the settlement in the Cahokia area is from the year 600 AD, at a time when the Mayan civilization would have been at its peak, but it was not until after the largest city of the Maya began to fall in the 1000s that Cahokia came into its own. It's estimated that the city center held as many as 15,000 people, making comparable in size to European cities of the same era, and reached the height of its productivity between roughly 1000 to 1300 AD. Right around the middle of that time period, about 1170 AD, a devastating fire ripped through the main ceremonial plaza at the center of the city. After the fire, it appeared that the city was changed place. New architectural designs sprang up along with new defensive walls. There was also a sudden influx of clay plates featuring sun symbolism. So what happened and who started the fire? A new scientific investigation published this month in the Journal of Field Archaeology attempts to puzzle out what caused the fire and what happened in the aftermath. University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign archaeologist Timothy Poketat and his colleagues pored over new dig sites in East St. Louis and examined the evidence for the fire. The evidence is extremely strange. What we know is that the fire likely consumed over 100 thatched buildings, which were all packed with freshly made luxuries like floor mats, clay pots, pipes, ceremonial bones like snake vertebra, and baskets of corn kernel. Already this is a bit odd. A typical home would not contain items that are all new. You'd find garbage, gnawed bones, chipped pots, and corn cobs along with kernels. In fact, none of these houses had any garbage pits associated with them at all. Adding to the mystery is that these houses seemed hastily constructed and were placed much more closely together than homes elsewhere in the city. Also, they were built in an area at Poketat that Poketat and colleagues described as overdeveloped but underused, a region more like a public event space than a neighborhood. The researchers believe that the fire might have been an accident or caused by warfare, but far more likely is that it was actually a ceremonial fire, a kind of mass sacrifice which marked a dramatic shift in the cultural and political life of Cahokia. It wasn't uncommon for the mound builders to burn the structures they built at the top of mounds in ceremonial events. Often they would include offerings like the ones found in those burned houses, especially corn kernels, Indeed, these ceremonial fires sound a lot like Burning Man, right down to the drug use. Cahokians liked to imbibe something called black drink, which was a super strong caffeinated brew that probably got everyone seriously jazzed until they threw up. But if this fire was sacrificial, it was on a scale that was unprecedented, at least as far as we can tell from the archaeological record. There are other odd clues about this fire, too. Instead of rebuilding after the fire burned, it appears that people simply swept up the coal and ashes and put them in tidy piles. Nothing was rebuilt. This is particularly notable because in Cahokia and its outlying suburbs, homes that were damaged were typically rebuilt. Often a duplicate structure would be built directly on top of the old one. So if this had been an accidental fire or a casualty of war, we'd expect to see new homes up on top, but nothing was there. Pokitat and his fellow researchers also noted that in the wake of the fire, Cahokian culture seemed to change in very specific ways. One very interesting shift is that people no longer built large mansion-like homes that we believe were reserved for aristocrats and priests. These mansions were built in characteristic L and T shapes, and sometimes a ceremonial building would be circular. After the fire, all the buildings and homes were square or rectangular. It's possible to suggest Pekati colleagues that the fire was part of an uprising against an established group that had once occupied these more ostentatious homes. There were other cultural changes too. I already mentioned that there was a sudden rise in popularity of sun imagery on clay plates. It's possible that this was a sign of a new spiritual or political regime in the area. Still, people continued to build their characteristic mounds and to farm, so many aspects of the life remained the same, including the practice of building atop the pyramids. In other words, the old regime may have been toppled, but many of the old ways continued on. What's certain, as say the researchers, is that this fire marked a major turning point in Cahokia civilization and perhaps the beginning of the end. By 1400, Cahokia and its environs had been almost entirely abandoned. It's possible that the fire marked a decline in the city's power, and the sacrifices were part of an ongoing effort to bring back the city's former status. As more evacuations are done in East St. Louis, we can hope to find out more about this incredible lost civilization. For now, the story of its mysterious fire is a reminder that ancient civilizations are not monolithic. Like civilizations today, they underwent many changes and revolutions. What to us appears in retrospect to be a single entity known as Cahokia, many have been to the locals, many cities and many cultures that just happen to inhabit the same region. What's fascinating is that this region along the Mississippi is an area that has been home to many cities for hundreds of years. After all, St. Louis occupies the old footprint of Cahokia today. Perhaps in another millennium, the archaeologists who occupy some future city in the area will be uncovering the old breweries and coal mines of St. Louis and wondering what happened to the people who worked in them. And you can read the scientific paper, find out about visiting the Cahokia Mounds. This is by Annalie Newitz, io9.com, and it's on Humans Are Free by Alexander Light. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.